His father used being cheap as a way to make a fortune. Trump uses being cheap as a way to hide the fact that he's squandered that fortune. He really doesn't have nearly as much cash as he's ever said that he has. And being cheap a lot of the time, he's extravagant and indulgent with himself. And then he refuses to pay his bills pretty much everywhere else in his life. And that includes his lawyers much of the time. So that's a lot of why he has these people around him that are basically sycophants. A, he wants to feel important. B, he doesn't want to have to pay them that much.
I'm delighted to be talking to the lawyer and legal commentator Tristan Snell, whose book, Taking Down Trump, 12 Rules for Prosecuting Donald Trump by Someone Who Did It Successfully, is out now. Former President Trump is no stranger to courtrooms over the past few years, with Snell leading New York State's prosecution of the Trump University case, resulting in Trump having to shell out $25 million to defrauded students. But it's not easy to prosecute Trump, even before the start of his political career. Tristan Snell, welcome to Times Radio.
Thanks for having me.
Just remind people about the case in which you prosecuted Trump successfully as New York State's Assistant Attorney General, the Trump University case. What was that all about?
So Donald Trump back in the mid-2000s had started what looked like a university, Trump University, but it was actually unlicensed, unaccredited, not actually a university, and was effectively a wealth creation seminar program that was a giant bait and switch scam. So students would come in, they'd be told, oh, you're going to learn everything about how to invest in real estate by Donald Trump's handpicked instructors using Donald Trump's secrets. We're going to give you special access to financing. And all of that was wrong. All of that was false. All of that was a lie. And the students were ripped off for as much as $35,000 or more each. And it was a total of about $40 million worth of fraud. We sued them and eventually were able to get a settlement of $25 million. Of the students who put in claims, they got about 90% of their money back.
Okay. And was this the first time that Trump had suffered a major legal defeat of this sort?
This was really the first big loss that he suffered in litigation. The case we brought was filed in 2013. There was also a private civil class action in parallel with that. The settlement came after the 2016 election, and it was really the first time that anybody had brought him to justice, had really, brought some accountability his way. And the way I see it is that playbook that we developed in our case, the New York Attorney General's office has continued to pursue and perfect that playbook in subsequent actions. They then brought the Trump Foundation case in 2019 that was successful, and then have now brought this new case against the Trump Organization that's the one that everybody knows about today, that has resulted in this $460 million judgment that Trump is potentially going to be appealing.
So tell us a bit about then the 12 rules that you figured out during this trial, which I guess are the 12 rules that you feel people should use prosecuting him henceforth.
Yeah, so to boil it down further, I break it into three sections. There's the section on leadership first, then we talk about the investigation phase, then we talk about going public. You have to start with leadership. It comes from the top of the organization. Who is that elected or appointed prosecutor who is running the office? And are they fully on board? Have they bought into the mission? Have they been co-opted by Trump? One of Trump's favorite moves over the years has been to either co-opt the prosecutor directly or weasel his way into their inner circle with promises of campaign donations or other support or threats of retribution and a case turning into a giant publicity problem and legal quagmire. That's how he's been able to avoid a lot of his consequences for years. The second part of the book focuses on the need to get a lot more creative with investigating him. He's not going to actually provide the documents that he is legally obligated to produce, so you've got to go get them from other places. For example, you can get them from his vendors. Trump outsources everything. He doesn't do very much in-house. So if you can figure out what third parties he's worked with to do everything, you can go subpoena those parties. And some of those vendors, it'll turn out he never actually fully paid. So those people are potential allies. his cheapness is one of his Achilles
That's
heels, and
fascinating.
you can really take advantage of
Yeah,
that.
that's
Yeah.
absolutely fascinating. Look, the extent to which he attacks and blusters, the extent to which he'll try and discredit any court he's appearing in, discredit the judge, discredit witnesses. I guess I have two questions. Firstly, is that unusual for somebody who's in the sort of cases he finds himself in? And secondly, what do you do about that?
Yeah, it is. It's not entirely, it's unusual, but it's not unique. That's probably the best way to put it. You don't see this typically, this kind of scorched earth attacks on the judge, on the prosecutor, on even their clerks and assistants. That's not very typical at all. Really, if you want to find a parallel to the kind of attacking that Trump does, and this is one of the rules later in the book in the going public section, talking about you've got to be able to weather those counterattacks. You have to ignore them. It shows that you're on the right track. There's another rule regarding how he'll try to come up with all sorts of diversions and distractions via the clown car of lawyers that will open up on the other side. He doesn't actually fight on the law or on the merits or on the facts. He comes up with a whole bunch of other things that have nothing to do with the case, and you just need to be able to stay your course. To look at parallels for the kind of scorched earth tactics that he engages in, though, you really have to look at things like the mob, at least if we're talking about the US. You have to look at somebody like John Gotti, who was a famous mafia leader who was acquitted the first three times that he was tried for various racketeering and other mob-related charges. He eventually was taken down the fourth time that the feds uh, indicted him. So he was very much a Trump-like figure in the way that he played to the media. He played the victim all the time. A lot of Gotti's defense, so to speak, was that he was the victim. He was the persecuted party. The prosecutors were out of control, and thereby he was the one on the side of truth, justice, and the American way. And playing to the tabloids in New York, it was somewhat similar to what Trump is doing now. Look, if Gotti were still around, I mean, he's been in prison this whole time. He might get out and run for office as a Republican.
And what
I mean, it would fit. It would fit.
you mentioned, the sort of the clown car of lawyers he'll unleash because he's a wealthy man.
Yep.
Does he have good lawyers? Because I mean, the impression one often gets of Trump is he surrounds himself with people who are sort of, I mean, caricatures in much the same way that he is. But is that sometimes concealing people who really know what they're doing?
Not really. The best that he's able to do is to get folks who are good at being fixers. He's done that effectively at times. The biggest thing that he's looking for to surround himself with are yes men. He's looking for people that he can own, and somebody who really has you know he's looking for those people that are vulnerable that way, that they're willing to just be completely controlled by him, and that they'll say and do whatever he wants them to do. That's the most important thing. The other thing is that he is extremely cheap, and that again we come back to that. And I think it's been part of he inherited it from his father. His father used being cheap as a way to make a fortune. Trump uses being cheap as a way to hide the fact that he's squandered that fortune. He really doesn't have nearly as much cash as he's ever said that he has. And being cheap a lot of the time, he's extravagant and indulgent with himself. And then he refuses to pay his bills pretty much everywhere else in his life. And that includes his lawyers much of the time. So that's a lot of why he has these people around him that are basically sycophants. He wants to feel important. B, he doesn't want to have to pay them that much.
Sure, understood. Well, look, we're recording this on Wednesday. It'll be played out on Saturday. I must admit, I don't know how many times Trump is due in court in between. So sometimes it feels like it's
Yeah.
every other day. For the benefit of our listeners, could you sort of lay out briefly the timeline ahead for Trump and the many court proceedings that are lining up against him?
Sure. The big date that's coming up is March 25th is really one to watch. There's some others in the meantime, but March 25th is a big day. That is the day that the New York criminal trial for the falsification of business records regarding the hush money to Stormy Daniels, that case begins jury selection on March 25th. It is also the day that he needs to put up a bond or some other amount of money for the judgment that he owes to the New York Attorney General's office, that $464 billion and counting, it's accruing interest every day. But he owes either the judgment or a bond in that amount no later than March 25th if he is to stop the judgment from being collected. He's already filed a notice of appeal, but the notice of appeal will not stay the judgment. It will not stop the judgment from being processed unless he comes up with the money or a bond in that amount. Trump has already tried to say, well, is $100 million enough? And the court said no. Trump tried when he played these games with the $83 million that he owes E. Jean Carroll. He tried to get delays on that to get additional time to reply, and the court said no. So we'll have to see what happens. That's going to be a big day. But then we've got this big criminal trial coming. I would imagine opening arguments in that are going to occur probably the week after, the first week of April. But that trial will be kicking off. It does not look like it is going to get delayed. Trump's trying to delay it right now. He just tried to see if he could delay it on grounds of presidential immunity. I would expect that is going to be denied because the events in question happened before he was president. So it's actually a relatively easy one to dispense with and say, no, you don't get to get a get out of jail free card because you were the president one time.
Well, so look, I mean, in your experience, you saw Trump elected president despite the fact that he had the Trump University fraud case hanging
True.
over him. What, I mean, when it comes to the politics of it all, what impact do you expect any or all of these court cases to have? Is there a court case out there that prevents him from standing in the election?
I don't think there's a court case that prevents him from standing in the election. However, I do think that there's a number of these court cases that could prevent him from winning the election. There's good polling numbers, for what they're worth, that show that there is a significant portion of the American public that I think is otherwise Trump supportive, who have said that they will not be able to support him for president if he's a convicted felon. Now, I would love to see that done at another level of detail, where we could ask people, well, what if it's this falsification of business records case? Is that sufficient? Or do you need to see him get convicted of the charges that have been brought against him for January 6th or the classified records case? We'll have to see. But I do believe that a number of these other trials are going to happen before the election. I think that there's going to be a number of convictions. And I do believe that there's going to be enough people that would otherwise support him, that might have voted for him in 2016 or 2020, that are going to say, you know what, this is a bridge too far. Yes, you're right about the Trump University case. That did not stop him from getting the presidency in 2016. But that was a civil case. And I don't think it just had the same weight with people. And also, it unfortunately did not go to trial in time. Those cases were ready to go to trial in the spring of 2016, and Trump successfully got the cases delayed until after the election. That was in my view, an incorrect ruling by the judges in those cases. They should not have allowed for that to happen. Just because someone's a candidate for office doesn't mean that they get to avoid legal consequences. It's you're holding those people in a special category above the law, and that's not how the rule of law or a republic or anything that purports to be a democracy should function.
Well, I mean, people, often worry that if you have enough money and enough influence, particularly in the United States, perhaps it's possible to escape justice. How does the many cases against Donald Trump relate to that? Should it tell us that it's impossible for someone, even with the power and wealth of Donald Trump, to escape justice? Or might it in fact tell us that as these judgments perhaps rack up against him and he remains unstoppable, kind of the opposite is true?
It's a lot of why I wrote the book, because I really feel like there's a lot of people of the majority, and it is a significant majority of Americans who do believe that he should face accountability for the things that he's being accused of, that at the very least he should be standing trial, that the legal process should play out, and he should be in front of these juries. There's a lot of people, even in that pro-accountability camp, who believe cynically that it'll never actually happen, that he'll manage to wiggle away from everything. That pessimism and cynicism is, in my view, very corrosive. If you lose people's faith in the system, it could be very, very difficult to get it back. And at that point, if people just believe, you know what, the whole thing's rigged anyway, people may have a defeatist attitude and just say, you know what, fine. It's all rigged anyway, so it doesn't really matter if the next person comes in, and it could be him again or whoever, and corrodes the system even further, and kicks away any last vestiges of sort of democratic norms. I think that these cases are incredibly important for America and for a lot of the world, for the ability of any advanced democracy with the rule of law to be able to withstand these kind of attacks to the system. And can we actually bring somebody like him to justice? It's not, the playbook is not just about stopping Donald Trump, it's about stopping anybody like him as well. And as I point out numerous times in the book, there's a major role for the public to play, not just in the US, but in any country, to demand that justice be served and demand that accountability happen.
Yeah, understood. Well, look, the book is Taking Down Trump 12 Rules for Prosecuting Donald Trump by Someone Who Did It Successfully, and it's out now. Tristan Snell, thanks very much indeed.